The aspect of fear has been and always will be a major determiner in the outcome of battle. Ancient warfare in particular was a place of great terror for both sides, and those who were capable of utilizing it generally won their fights. The first weapon of psychological warfare I will mention is the Carnage. The ancient historian Diodorus Siculus expresses that, quote, "Their trumpets are of a peculiar barbarian kind. They blow into them and produce a harsh sound which suits the tumult of war." It's easy to imagine how a Roman soldier would feel nervously standing in formation, hearing the eerie sound be played before a battle. Polybius gives a striking account, saying, "For there were among them such innumerable horns and trumpets, which were being blown at the same time from all parts of their army, and their cries were so loud and piercing that the noise seemed to come not from human voices and trumpets, but from the whole countryside at once." This aspect of making noise makes perfect sense, as tests today have shown that shouting and screaming activate fear responses deep in the minds of those who listen to them. Not only will it frighten the enemy, but shouting is proven to release stress for the person doing it. It gives the soldier, full of fear, an outlet to handle that terror and a way to conquer it. They make the conscious decision to fight, denying the alternative flight response. The question of to flee or not to flee is a massive one in the mind of the foot soldier. It all comes down to the survival instinct in each individual, which shouts in their head to run for the hills in an act of self-preservation. This is the natural human instinct when faced with imminent disaster. However, on the ancient battlefield, this survival instinct causes massacres. When troops decide on their own to run because the odds seem to not be in their favor, the only thing that they had going for them, their unity, completely fractures and they are hunted down by the enemy which won the battle of fear by maintaining their cohesion. The standard thought of an infantryman is that if his side seems to be getting crushed, the sooner he leaves, the better his chances will be of making it to safety. The problem, however, is if everyone in the army thinks like this, there will no longer be one. This is why the army's morale must remain high. During the Battle of Bibracte, all the horses in the Roman army are reported as being moved away from the troops to make sure that everyone knew there was no retreat. Throughout antiquity, what happens after the battle is decided varies dramatically. In some situations, prisoners will be taken captive and later traded back in exchange for money or land. In others, those who flee will be murdered and their towns burned down. During the Gallic Wars, for example, Caesar often razed the villages of those who contested Roman rule. It is easy to see how the expectations of treatment would determine the ferocity in which troops fought. At the Battle of Zama between the Romans and the Carthaginians, sound was once again used quite effectively. When they came within distance, the Roman soldiers charged the enemy, shouting as usual their war cry and clashing their swords against their shields, while the Carthaginian mercenaries uttered a strange confusion of cries, the effect of which was indescribable, for in the words of the poet, "The voice of all was not one, nor one their cry." The Parthians also used noise for psychological effect, beating drums throughout battle. Plutarch gives us the following visceral description of their use. "For the Parthians do not incite themselves to battle with horns or trumpets, but they have hollow drums of distended hide, covered with bronze bells, and on these they beat all at once in many quarters, and the instruments give forth a low and dismal tone, a blend of wild beast roar and a harsh thunder peal. They had rightly judged that, of all the senses, hearing is the one most apt to confound the soul, soonest rouses its emotion, and most effectively unseats the judgment." Yet another example of noise being used is at the Siege of Palliative. Alexander was trapped inside a valley, completely surrounded. He decided to array his forces into blocks of men 120 deep, and then he ordered them to move left and right while simultaneously swooshing their spears in a coordinated motion, no doubt making a terrifying noise and showing off the skill of the troops. For the tribes that were preparing to fight against these invaders, this must have been a terrifying sight. It quickly crushed their overall morale, as they were shown how truly powerful the other side was. After this, Alexander led his men against the enemy, which had, quote, "long been in a state of amazement at the sight." Then, when the order was passed to raise the battle cry and to make a clatter with their spears and shields, the tribespeople were even more alarmed by the sound and rushed back into their city. We see much later on in antiquity the author of the famous Ars Militaris, describing that patrol troops need to be reliable, well-built, and better equipped than the rest of the army. If they engage the enemy, they will make an imposing impression, and if they are captured, the foe will be impressed by their physique and weaponry. Likewise, he recommends hiding healthy and well-equipped enemy prisoners that were captured, but if they look miserable, to show them to the entire army to make them think the rest of the opposing army to be weak. Armor and weaponry is seen throughout history as a huge part of frightening the enemy. with armor making these either appear taller or inhuman, and shields with designs to put forth the appearance of a warrior nation. Faces were engraved on some armor, feathers put on others, and sometimes the helmet had more height to it. The main idea was to put forth the impression that you were the dominant soldier, and by extension, the dominant army. Here we see Greek hoplites using the famous Pylos and Phrygian helmets while displaying their frightening shields. This image is from a vase painting of hoplites fighting with a display of their raised helmets and their bronze cuirasses with six-pack outlines to make them appear strong. This is the helmet of a Roman triarii. Notice the face on top and the feathers. Finally, a Phrygian helmet with a face guard to protect, but also most certainly to frighten as well. Just imagine the absolute terror that would be present in the heart of a levy called up with little to no training to fight upon seeing the enemy fully clad in armor, with facial expressions invisible. It would have been an immediate strike to morale before the battle even started. While the mind state of the infantry in a battle is the most important thing, the animals forced into the contest must not be forgotten. They suffered from similar fears as the rest of us and had to receive immense training before being combat ready. This often consisted of brutal desensitization through pain and loud noises that they would encounter on the battlefield. A perfect representation of this fear is at the Battle of Raphael, between Ptolemaic Egypt and the Seleucid Empire. According to Polybius, the battle was kicked off by the charging of elephants, in which most of Ptolemy's animals, which are smaller Libyan elephants, were afraid to face the fight because they cannot stand the smell or the trumpeting of the Indian elements, and are frightened at their size and strength. And because of this, they run away from them very quickly. This is exactly what happened on this occasion, and upon their being thrown into confusion and being driven back upon their own lines, Ptolemy's guard gave way before the rush of the animals. Luckily for Ptolemy, however, the battle was saved by the success of his cavalry on the right flank. The following examples are some of the more interesting pieces of armor used on elephants and horses. The most common is the crest above their head, which is meant to make the animal appear taller, just as it was meant to function on people. In a similar way as when a bear is attacking, you're supposed to make yourself appear as big as possible, this would have helped elephants to frighten cavalry. These armors also certainly had an effect on humans too, as seeing your opponent with a taller animal than you or a better dressed one would most definitely cause fear. I hope this video showed you that warfare in the past had more dimensions to it than are often portrayed. In the next video, we will take a look at the very important matter of how morale was maintained on the ancient battlefield. Thank you for watching.